Well, welcome back, everyone. So, in part two, we will shift our focus from what happened that day, 11 November, to what came next, and more specifically, how that moment is remembered around the world. We'll look at how different countries mark November 11, from poppies and silence to parades, poems, and even public holidays. While the origins of remembrance lies at the end of the First World War, it has since evolved to reflect the sacrifices of later conflicts as well. We'll explore the traditions, where the tradition came from, what they mean, and how they vary across countries like the UK, Canada, France, South Africa, US, and Belgium. So let's get started. The idea of formal remembrance began almost immediately after the end of the First World War. The first Armistice Day was held on 11 November 1919, exactly 1 year after the guns had fallen silent. King George V requested that the nation pause for 2 minutes at 11 a.m., a moment to remember those who had died and to reflect on what had been endured. The idea was simple but powerful. For just 2 minutes, the entire country will freeze. Trains halted, workers stood silently, traffic stopped in the streets, people bowed their heads in offices, factories, and schools, and the silence became one of the most moving and enduring traditions of remembrance. But this idea did not begin in London. It began right here in South Africa, in Cape Town. In 1918, during the last year of the war, Cape Town's mayor, Councillor Sir Harry Hands, established a daily 2 minute pause known as the 2 minute silent pause of remembrance. It was suggested by local councillor Robert Bryden after Hands received news that his son Reginald Hands had died from gas injuries in France. Every day at noon, the firing of the Signal Hill gun marked the start of the silence. 1 minute to give thanks for those who had survived, and 1 minute to honor those who had fallen. The entire city stopped, traffic, trams, and pedestrians, while a bugler played the last post and revel. This daily observance continued for a full year and soon spread to other towns across South Africa and then to other parts of the British Empire. Among those who witnessed this was Sir Percy Fitzpatrick, a South African author, politician, and father of a fallen soldier, Major Percy Nugent Fitzpatrick, killed in 1917 on the Western Front. Deeply moved by what he saw in Cape Town, Fitzpatrick believed that a 2 minute silence should become an empire wide act of remembrance. In 1919, he wrote to Lord Milner, the British colonial secretary, describing how Cape Town came to a standstill every day at noon. He suggested that this silence should become part of the official Armistice Day observance across the empire. His proposal was passed to King George V, who approved it. The King's proclamation was issued just weeks before the first anniversary of the armistice, establishing the 2 minute silence as a central part of the 1919 commemoration, a tradition that continues to this day. King George V later sent Sir Percy Fitzpatrick a letter of gratitude, personally thanking him for this wonderful suggestion. Fitzpatrick himself credited the idea to the citizens of Cape Town, writing that while others had copied the practice, nothing was as dramatic as the Cape Town observation, simply because of the midday gun. So the 2 minute silence that we now associate with Remembrance Sunday and Remembrance Day, observed across Britain and the Commonwealth every 11 November, began not in Westminster, but in South Africa, born from loss, gratitude, and one family's grief. Alongside the silence, new traditions began to take shape. In 1920, the tomb of the unknown warrior was unveiled in Westminster Abbey, representing all those who had no known grave. And the reason why this is called the tomb of the unknown warrior, emphasis on unknown, is they chose a random body and put it in this tomb so that anyone who has a family member who was never identified will believe that this is their son, father, uncle, grandfather, whoever. Now, the following year, the red poppy became the official symbol of remembrance, inspired by John McCrae's poem In Flanders Fields, and introduced by the newly formed Royal British Legion to raise money for veterans. Over time, Armistice Day evolved into Remembrance Day. The main ceremony was moved to the Sunday closest to 11 November, now known as Remembrance Sunday. But wherever it is marked in Britain, Canada, the Anzac Nation, South Africa, or beyond, the traditions all trace back to that first moment of silence in Cape Town in 1918. First up, we'll have the United Kingdom. In the UK, Remembrance is marked with deep traditions and national significance. While 11 November, Armistice Day, is still recognised, the UK's main public commemorations are held on the second Sunday of November, known as Remembrance Sunday. This change was made in 1939 at the outbreak of the Second World War to avoid disrupting wartime production on weekdays. The Sunday observance had remained ever since. Each year on Remembrance Sunday, a national service is held at the Cenotaph on Whitehall in London. The word cenotaph means empty tomb, and this one has stood since 1920 as the symbolic heart of national remembrance. The service is led by the monarch and attended by members of the royal family, government officials, military leaders, veterans, and representatives of the Commonwealth. At approximately 11 a.m., at exactly 11 a.m., a 2-minute silence is observed, followed by the last post, and the silence is often marked by the firing of a gun or bells in cities across the country. After the silence, the monarch leads the laying of the wreath at the foot of the cenotaph, and representatives of his government, armed forces, political parties outside government, faith groups, and the public follows. Across the country, similar ceremonies take place at local war memorials, churches, and town squares. One of the most visible and lasting traditions in the UK is, of course, the red poppy. In the weeks leading up to Remembrance Day and Remembrance Sunday, millions of people wear a paper or enamel poppy on their lapel. The poppy is a symbol of both remembrance and hope, inspired by the fields of Flanders where poppies grew amongst the fallen. The funds raised by the poppy appeal support veterans and their families in the UK. In recent years, alternative colored poppies have also been in the cycle. The white poppy symbolizes peace. The black poppy commemorates Black and Caribbean servicemen and women. The purple poppy honors animals that served and died in the war. While some of these symbols are subject to public debate, they reflect the evolving nature of remembrance in diverse societies. Finally, the UK also holds the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall on the evening before Remembrance Sunday. It features music, reading, and a moving visual tribute of red poppies, each one representing a life lost in the war. Next up, we have Canada. In Canada, Remembrance Day is observed on 11 November and no other date, unlike in the UK. Unlike the UK, where it's mainly on the Sunday before Remembrance Day, Canada only commemorates it on the actual day, the anniversary of the armistice, with widespread public events and official ceremonies held on that day, regardless of which day of the week it fell. Remembrance Day is a statutory holiday in most provinces and territories, but in others like Ontario and Quebec, it's not a holiday, but schools and workplaces still pause to mark the occasion. At the heart of Canada's remembrance is the National War Memorial in Ottawa. Each year on the morning of 11 November, thousands gather at Confederation Square to take part in the national ceremony. The Governor General, the Prime Minister, senior officials, military leaders, and veterans all attend. At exactly 11 a.m., a 2-minute silence is observed across the country, and like in the UK, This is followed by the playing of the last post, a laying of wreaths, and the reading of the Act of Remembrance. One of the most emotional parts of this service is the role of the Silver Cross Mother. Chosen each year by the Royal Canadian Legion, the Silver Cross Mother represents all mothers who have lost children in the wars. She lays a wreath at the foot of the memorial on behalf of grieving families across the country. It is a quiet but deeply meaningful tribute. The red poppy is also worn in Canada. It is distributed by the Royal Canadian Legion beginning in late October, and Canadians wear it proudly over their hearts. After the ceremony, it is common to see people pinning their poppies onto the wreaths or memorials as a gesture of respect. Remembrance is also heavily integrated in Canadian education. Schools across the country hold their own ceremonies, with students reciting poems, laying wreaths, and observing silence. Many children grow up learning learning the poem and later the song in Flanders Fields, written by Canadian poet and doctor John McCrae, which remains a cornerstone of Canada's remembrance identity. Another significant site is Beaumont Hamel in France, where Canadian and especially Newfoundland soldiers fought during the Battle of the Somme. The memorial park is there to visit, and it is regularly visited by Canadians. And every year on 1 July, Memorial Day in Newfoundland, a separate remembrance ceremony is held. And next up, we come all the way home to South Africa. Now, South Africa played a big role in the First World War, from the campaigns in German Southwest Africa to the Western Front in Europe, and lost over 12,000 soldiers during the conflict. While Remembrance is not as widely celebrated in our country as in other countries in the Commonwealth, Remembrance Day still holds deep meaning, particularly among veterans, military families, and historians. South Africa also holds a unique place in the history of remembrance. As we have seen earlier, it's in Cape Town that this tradition of the 2 minute of silence begins. Now, today, Remembrance Sunday is held on the closest Sunday to 11 November, and it is marked by services in major cities such as Cape Town, Joburg, Durban, and Port Elizabeth. These are often held at cenotaphs or war memorials built in the 1920s and 1940s to honor those lost in both world wars. Many of these memorials list the names of the fallen soldiers in English. Service usually includes a parade by veterans, cadets, and members of the armed forces, a reading of the names of the fallen, the laying of wreaths and crosses, the 2 minute silence observed at 11 a.m., and the sounding of the last post. The South African Legion, a veterans organization established after the First World War, plays a key role in organizing many of these ceremonies. It also runs the poppy campaigns, providing red poppies to be worn leading up to Remembrance Sunday. While Remembrance Day is not a public holiday in our country, some schools and organizations do participate in marking the event. The observance is strongest among the older generations and military families, as well as in communities with historical ties to the war. And next up, we have France and Belgium. In both France and Belgium, the memory of the First World War is not just historical, it is deeply rooted in the landscape, in the towns, the villages that were destroyed and rebuilt in the aftermath of the war. It is also marked in cemeteries and monuments in the regions. In France, 11 November is known as Armistice Day, and it is a national public holiday. It is a day of solemn commemoration marked by formal state ceremonies and quiet reflection in communities across the country. Every year, the President of the Republic leads a ceremony at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. At the center of this ceremony is the tomb of the unknown soldier, buried beneath the Arc in 1920. An eternal flame burns at the site, and every morning it is rekindled in a ritual. Every evening it is rekindled in a ritual of remembrance. On 11 November, the French president lays a wreath and military honors are paid to the fallen. The national anthem is played, followed by moments of silence and poetry readings. Schools across France often take part in Armistice Day commemorations. Students learn about the war, visit monuments, and participate in ceremonies by reading out the names of the fallen and laying wreaths. Many towns also hold services at their local war memorials, which list the name of those lost from those specific communities. Unlike the UK and the Commonwealth of Nations, poppies are not the primary symbol of remembrance in France. Instead, the traditional symbol is the bluet, or blue cornflower, which grows on French battlefields and was adopted in the 1920s to honor veterans and war victims. The Bluet de France is still sold today, with proceeds supporting former soldiers and their families. In Belgium, remembrance is especially prominent in Flanders, where some of the fiercest fighting of the war took place. The town of Ypres, known locally as Lepe, is the heart of Belgian remembrance. Once almost entirely destroyed by shellfire, Ypres has become a place of pilgrimage for those honoring the memory of the First World War. At the center of this is the Menin Gate Memorial to the Missing. Unveiled in 1927, the Menin Gate bears the names of over 54,000 British and Commonwealth soldiers who died at the Ypres salient and have no known grave. Every evening at 8 p.m., the streets of Ypres fall silent for the last post ceremony. Buglers from the local fire brigade play the last post beneath the arch, a ritual that has continued almost every single night since 1928, with only a brief pause during the Second World War. On 11 November, the Menin Gate becomes the focal point of Belgian remembrance. Dignitaries, veterans, school groups, and visitors from around the world gather for the ceremony, which includes a minute of silence, the laying of wreaths, and tributes in multiple languages. And finally, the United States of America. In the USA, 11 November is observed as Veterans Day, a day that shares its roots with Armistice Day, but which has evolved in different directions. The original observance began, just like in any other Allied nation, on 11 November 1919, 1 year after the anniversary of the end of World War I. President Woodrow Wilson issued a proclamation marking the anniversary as a day of solemn pride and gratitude. The focus was on peace and remembering those who had served in what was then called the Great War. In 1938, Armistice Day was made a federal holiday, still focused mainly on those who served in the First World War. But after the Second World War and the Korean War, there was a growing push to broaden its meaning. In 1954, following a bill signed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Armistice Day was officially renamed Veterans Day, a day not just to remember the fallen, but to honor all American veterans living and dead from all wars and periods of service. Unlike in the UK or Canada, Veterans Day in the United States is not focused on remembrance of the dead alone. That role is held by Memorial Day in May. Veterans Day is intended to recognize and thank all who served in the US Armed Forces, whether in wartime or peacetime. Still, the day retains strong connection to the First World War, and 11 November remains significant as the day the guns fell silent. Each year, the National Veterans Day ceremony is held at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, specifically at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The solemn white marble tomb, guarded 24/7, is the resting place of unidentified American servicemen from multiple conflicts. At 11 a.m., a wreath is laid at the tomb by the president or a representative, and a moment of silence is held. While its character differs from Remembrance Day in Commonwealth countries, Veterans Day in the United States shares a common origin, the end of the First World War, and remains deeply tied to national identity, military history, and personal reflection. As the First World War has passed from living memory into history, the way the world observes remembrance is gradually changed. While the core traditions, silence, wreaths, poppies remain in place, Many countries have seen shifts in how remembrance is understood, expressed, and taught. This is not a sign of decline. In many ways, it reflects how remembrance has adapted to a changing world. One of the most notable changes is who we remember. Originally, the ceremonies were focused primarily on the fallen of the First World War, and over time that focus expanded to include the dead of the Second World War and later conflicts Korea, Vietnam, Falklands, the Middle East, and beyond. In many countries today, remembrance honors not just the dead, but also those who served and survived, including veterans of peacekeeping missions in Africa and Europe and humanitarian deployments. Another major change has been the rise of digital remembrance. For example, during COVID-19, many countries held their entire services virtual with the exception of a few designated people on site. In many countries, younger people are also being encouraged to take part in remembrance ceremonies. Scouts, cadets, and school children lay wreaths, read poems, and participate in local parades, a visible reminder that remembrance is not only for the old, but for the future. Artists, writers, and musicians have also continued to shape how we remember. From films like 1917, They Shall Not Grow Old, and All Quiet on the Western Front, to poems, songs, and public art installations, creative expression has helped breathe life into this history. And across the world, the way we remember the end of the First World War and all the wars since may differ in forms, but the purpose remains the same. Whether it's the 2 minute silence in London, the Bleuette in France, the last post beneath the Menin Gate in Belgium, or the flag lined cemeteries of the United States, each tradition is rooted in the same idea that sacrifice should not be forgotten. Some countries mark the day with grand public ceremonies, others with quiet personal reflection. Some wear red poppies, others wear blue cornflowers, white poppies, or even none at all. Some gather by the thousands at memorials, others stand in silence at small village memorials with just a handful of people. But in every case, these acts say the same thing. We remember. We remember the moment when the guns fell silent at 11 a.m. on the 11th of November 1918. We remember the names carved into stone, the letters home that were never answered, the empty chairs at dinner tables. We remember those who came back changed and those who never came back at all. And we remember not just for the sake of the past, but for the future, so that the lessons of war are not lost with time. As four well-known lines of one of the most famous poems in the world goes, they shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Thank you.